All right, well, for those that are here, I'll go ahead and make my introduction. This is Julie, host for this room and club. Just a few clubhouse pointers. You can use the plus sign at the bottom to ping others you think may be interested in conversation into this room, which please do so. And you can narrow your search by searching for keywords that might be in people's bios. That way, when Clubhouse will cut you off after pinging a certain number of people in, so ping with caution. And then be sure to follow me and our moderators, panelists, everybody here today, and follow our club, Consuli Conversations. You can tap the little greenhouse at the top, and that way you'll see any upcoming rooms we have and get notifications for those. We do encourage everyone to raise their digital hand if you have a question, if you're in the audience. We do our very best to get to everyone. And additionally, to support those using closed captions, please state your name when you begin speaking and state your name again at the end. So you would say, my name is Julie and I'm done speaking. And for any direct questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, my email is in my bio. And I love hearing from you guys. So if you would like to join our panel, if you have somebody to recommend, if you have questions, anything at all, reach out to me directly. You can also find our social media links in my bio and in the Consuli Conversations bio. So please follow those. Learn a little more about us. And for those that don't yet know Consuli, broadly, Consuli is a public benefit company with the mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy. Experts do suggest our individual data is worth $20,000 per year. So we help people choose who gets access to and how their personal information is used, and if and when desired, get them paid for their data and make medicine better. We do this by operating a marketplace for members where we become their agent, and our members receive smart-matched, individualized offers from us for opportunities, including participating in clinical trials as well as data trials. There's no cost to join our movement. You can learn more at consuli.net, consuli.net. We'll also ping it to the top of the room for those that want to check it out. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to our room co-facilitators, Michael Young and Heather Williams, who will be introducing themselves and our expert guests. Michael, now over to you. This is Julie and I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Julie. Appreciate your help with that. Heather, happy to have you bring us into the conversation here. I just want to reinforce that what I can tell from those people who are on here, most everybody looks like an experienced Clubhouse member. We have one or two people in the audience who actually have the little party hat. So, Elle, happy to have you joining us here. And certainly anyone that's in the listening end of things here, I encourage you to join us because we've got a really interesting topic today, one that came up several times in our canvassing of, nationwide canvassing here. A lot of people questioning, and because of the role that Consuli plays in this, wanting to understand about the emerging roles that are taking are beginning to show up in biopharma companies around managing health equity for all the patients enrolling in their clinical trials. So, I think what we'll do is, Heather, if you don't mind, take us around the horn here and people can both introduce themselves as well as give an opening gambit.
Sounds great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to Julie as well for kicking off the day so far. I'm thrilled to be here. I love these monthly Clubhouse discussions. And my name's Heather Williams, and my background is from the data management perspective, as well as a bit of a dabbling on operations. So I've worked with both CROs and EDC vendors in the industry for about a decade now. I can't believe it's been that long. And I'm really excited about how we make visibility into what's happening in trials something that's more available to the general public. So I'm excited about our question today, and we'll open that discussion very shortly. But before we do that, what we'll do is just do a quick introduction of everyone who's in the room as a panelist today, so that everybody knows who's here and what their background is. And if we can start today, let's see, maybe Edie, we can start with you.
Absolutely, happy to. I'm Edie Edens. I'm with First Class Solutions. So I'm an attorney by trade who, excuse me, took a very serendipitous turn after spending the beginning components of my career in international human rights law into research compliance and research ethics, and spent a decade inside a very large academic medical center with an emphasis on oncology and site operations, as well as IRB, regulatory, and all the other fun acronyms I know lots of folks on this call are familiar with, and then moved into the consulting side. So same services, just a different vendor in a different space, because much as I love AMC life, I also really wanted an opportunity to work with small sites and community sites and clinical trial management software vendors, or as relevant to this discussion, and I think incredibly important, clinical trial patient recruitment firms, right, and what they're doing with data and what the privacy and compliance behind that is. So I can't wait to talk about the topic today, and I will pass the horn to Justin. Would you like to do your introduction now?
Yeah, hi, I'm Justin Gundlach. I worked in biomedical research for about 18 years at a large academic medical center. My formal training and the majority of the beginning of my career was in the laboratory side of research, but the last several years I've branched out and managed teams that do a variety of different research modalities, including a handful of large clinical trials. Definitely an interesting topic. Probably the two biggest clinical trials that I oversee. One has a very, very specific, patient population that we're recruiting for. The other is about as broad as you could possibly be. So the strategies that we use to identify the patients that we're recruiting for this trials are very different, but at the same time both are in the backdrop of, again, being a large world recognizable name academic medical center, which is a very different population of patients than the rest of the world. So something that we have to look at as we. This is Justin. I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Justin. Maybe if we kind of go around the room from the top. Alaminia, with an oncology focus in your clinical research profession, can you tell us?
Yep. Hi, I'm Almenia Garvey. I have been working in clinical research for well over 20 years. And I have experience in academia as well as CROs and now sites. I specialize in diversity, also in relationship management and strategies. And the relationship management helped me get into data. So really looking at the data from investigators as well as the patients, and worked a lot on EHR to EDC and other innovations like that. I'm Armenian. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm Armenian. I'm done speaking.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Matt, could you introduce?
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a researcher at the University of Minnesota, where I work on basic science and also build tools that are used for aging.
Thank you so much. And Michelle.
Yes, hello. I am Michelle Youngers. I'm happy to be here today. I've spent the last 30 years of my career in early stage companies, bringing disruptive process technologies to the life science industry. These include biotech, edtech, and health tech. I'm here today in my role as Chief Development Officer of Consuli. I'm very passionate about Consuli's offerings, and I think that we are addressing this issue of health equity in clinical trials. So I'm excited to learn more today about how the biopharma companies are addressing it. My sense is that there are these emerging roles that we're hoping to learn more about today. So thank you everyone for being here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'm Michelle, and I'm finished speaking.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And Brad, can we ask?
Sure. My name is Brad Hightower. I've worked in clinical trials on the site level for about 15 years now. I currently operate a site network based in Oklahoma City. Sort of expanding now more geographically, but the concept is we provide clinical trial infrastructure to physicians in the community so that they can offer clinical trials to their patients without necessarily having to hire a whole team. So we sort of handle that whole process from beginning to end. We're sort of the boots on the ground, so to speak, in clinical trial recruitment and execution. That's sort of the high level view. And I'm Brad, and that's it.
Thanks so much, Brad. And Amy.
Hey everybody, I'm Amy Sitnick. I head marketing at a company called Greenfire, and we are a service provider to the clinical trial industry. We provide patient reimbursement, travel, and payment technology for site sponsors and CROs around the world. Part of that is removing burden from participants in their participation in research. And as such, we get involved in quite a bit of these types of conversations in terms of, who are the folks participating in research and who are the different stakeholders in those different organizations. So happy to be part of this conversation and contribute today. Again, I'm Amy and I'm from Greenfire, and that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. It's always great to have so many different opinions and people joining us for these sessions. And to those in the audience, we look forward to hearing your thoughts. So let's get started. And to introduce today's one burning question, I just want to really quickly jump in here. It says, in August 2019, the National Library of Medicine began a global modernization project for clinicaltrials.gov. Michael, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say I think you were maybe reading last month, but that's okay.
No
Don't worry
problem.
about it. Let me share that the one burning question that we've got in front of us states that what are the emerging roles within biopharma companies to ensure, promote, and take responsibility for true health equity for all patients enrolling in clinical trials? Is this happening? And if so, is it being done effectively? The last part of that is obviously a little bit rhetorical, but maybe we could start the conversation with talking about what is health equity from the standpoint of this, multi-viewed group here. I'd be kind of interested to see. We certainly know that the concept of health equity has become much, much more important to patients who are enrolling in trials. But perhaps we could have a little discussion around that, and I'll lean on Michelle for just a second here to kind of tee that up with some of the views that she has developed. Michelle?
Oh, yep. I am not probably as well versed with Clubhouse as the rest of everyone else.
That's
Um,
okay.
so health equity means to me that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. And one of the topics that has been discussed on this Clubhouse before, I believe, is why are not clinical trials available to individuals more broadly, in terms of patients making a proactive decision to participate in a clinical trial and having that opportunity maybe early in their disease prognosis, as opposed to something that's just offered to them towards the end of their disease cycle, and also being lucky to maybe be in a clinic where there's knowledge of clinical trials that happen. So when I think of health equity, it's really um, eliminating these disparities in health, and since we're talking about clinical trials, the opportunity to really have the option to participate in clinical trials and make that accessible for diverse populations. I'm Michelle, and I'm finished speaking.
No, that's
No,
excellent,
that's
Michelle.
excellent, Michelle.
Thanks for that.
Thanks for that.
I'm going to call on Edie here because I think that this crosses over into a lot of the areas that she's been working in, and I also want to pay respect to the fact that she's going to need to leave us in a little while here. So, Edie, thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. So this is Edie. So, what's interesting to me as I was approaching this topic is the idea of health equity isn't new. It's not something that just happened during 2020 because of COVID, and now the world, knows what clinical trials are in a more painful way, right? And it's not just because we're really having a more open discussion about social justice and racial inequity, particularly in the United States after the unfortunate situation with George Floyd and the many that were before, during, and after that time. And I want to point that out because for years I've heard from the research ethics perspective conversations about, the difference between where you live in the world playing a role, right, in whether or not you have an access to trial, and not just meaning lesser developed nations and greater developed nations. No. Even, are you in rural Indiana or are you in the metro area of Indianapolis? Because, and I'm in Indianapolis for those who don't know, Indianapolis has IU Academic Medical Center. It's the largest medical school. It has a comprehensive cancer center. I mean, I'm 10 minutes away from the best care I could get in most of the therapeutic areas I could possibly get sick in my life. I'm also really lucky, right? And it may be that an individual who, frankly, is equally as affluent but has chosen a more rural lifestyle is not going to have equal access. It may also be a host of other socioeconomic diversity issues. The other thing I've seen for years before we get to 2019 that's of interest, of course, is the concept of subject sourcing. And what I mean by that is you intentionally conduct your clinical trial in a space where you have access to a greater population that is a good population to study your therapeutic intent on, right? But when you actually bring that therapeutic intent, drug, device, whatever it might be, to market, it's so priced out that those very individuals you experimented on, and let's be clear, that's what you did, those individuals can't actually have access to the care. And so staying on the trial or staying in an expanded access arm of the trial is literally the only way they will actually get full benefit from the therapeutic. So I think then we set the stage, right, historically that way and move into 2019, 2020, 2021, all the events that we're all painfully aware have occurred, and suddenly we see every major biopharma, major sponsor, industry player immediately posting a C-suite or high-level position of Chief Diversity Officer, DEI officer. And so for me, that I don't know how meaningful that is. I've heard in some organizations it's deeply meaningful. I've heard in others it's a placeholder, right? It's a window dressing to essentially pacify the public persona. And so for me, I've seen the most movement in individual advocacy, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, who are working in the clinical trial diversity and recruitment space, very specifically coming in to help sponsors or help sites. Granted, they're aimed at recruitment and numbers, but they're essentially leveraging their ability to bring numbers by saying, you will help us advocate for this particular area of patients or demographic of patients. And I've seen only a few, commercial-only research sites who finally are at a financial point where they have commandeered the market of their therapeutic area and are saying the same to industry and to sponsors that approach them of, look, we'll run your trial, we'll do it great, you'll get everything you need out of our site, and we'll have this amazing recruitment, but you're going to leverage this in that same community to ensure they are cared for because we care about these health equity issues. So I'm going to park that there because I'd really like to hear a better representative speak about the biopharma and sponsor side. We know that the conversation's happening. We know the DEI officers are getting posted, right? We see small advocacy groups championing this, but what is it like from the inside of industry? So I'd be really curious to hear it.
Edie, that was outstanding. I think that both your insight as well as your questions are really pertinent here. Does anyone want to take a shot at giving some insight as to whether or not the industry's response to the need for DEI, or as we often call it, JEDI, including the word justice, does this is this a, if you will, an opportunity for kind of doing the right thing, or is it window dressing? I'd be kind of curious to see.
Hey, Michael, it's Amy. I'm happy to jump in there.
Please
Just
do.
from where we sit, I have a conversation with a large pharma company later today on that exact same topic, and we get brought into a lot of these discussions because I think that large pharma and CROs, and to a lesser extent sites, are looking for some immediate solutions, that may help in diversity in particular. And I thought that the topic today was really interesting around the roles, because one thing that we've seen has been sort of like a unification within pharma of perhaps roles within the organizations that maybe were focused on like DEI from a employee engagement perspective, and sort of unifying those folks with like maybe their patient advocacy teams, and those folks sort of like unifying within their organizations to then figure out, all right, well, this is important not just from employee diversity, but also, in terms of diversity of our clinical trials and our staff and the partners that we work with, or are they women-owned or diverse participants, and so they're looking for. I really feel like they are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to look for both, I think, short-term fixes as well as long-term strategic relationships and education opportunities. In this case, I'm speaking, primarily regarding improving diversity in clinical research. And, a lot of them have sort of rallied and created, chief diversity officers or committees that are, focused on diversity. There's a whole host of names. We did do a survey over the summer of clinical research sponsors and CROs, and we asked folks to prioritize. I can pull the exact number, but we had around just under 200 people respond. And when we asked, is clinical diversity a priority for your organization, it was not as high as I would have expected, given how much we're all talking about diversity and how much we're seeing a lot of these roles crop up. I mean, I think it was around like 70%. It was certainly a priority, but it wasn't nearly as, I think, as urgent as, the need for technology to support decentralized trials. I saw that as like a more pressing initiative for sponsors and CROs. But nonetheless, we're definitely getting brought into lots of different communications. And some of the things, like I mentioned, are short-term things like patient reimbursement and removing sort of travel blockers. But then sort of like long-term things, like we're working on some ideas regarding, maybe legislation, with regards to, like, there's some things that the American Cancer Society is doing to sort of enable participant payments in clinical trials, or taxation of stipends, which can be a deterrent for people participating in research. So it's really multi-layered. In my gut, it certainly seems like it's exploded within the last year of our clients and prospects sort of trying to figure out how they can do the right thing, and everyone's trying to figure out, like, what else can we do?
Amy, this is Edie. Can I ask you really quick, are you seeing
Sure.
an approach to diversity very much centered in decentralized trials to the point that it's almost like this is our panacea, or is it a meaningful, we could use technology in decentralized trials to complement our diversity efforts, our equity efforts?
I think it's a complement. I don't think it's like a one-size-fits-all. I definitely think it's more of there's a sort of like a one. I don't know that they've sort of connected the dots internally within the organizations, sort of thinking like, oh, well, we can use technology to, I think they were thinking about it really in the sort of the COVID and post-COVID context, that it's really more for, reaching patients where they are, but it doesn't really seem like internally within organizations that they're thinking about decentralized trials for the express purpose of, reaching people that may have not been able to participate in studies. I have heard that from sites and global sites. Like, there was a research site I was speaking to recently in the UK, and they were saying how, decentralized trials and just even the movement towards having a bit of flexibility in participation is so important, because you're reaching people that may be hourly workers and not being able to take off. And if you give them the flexibility to complete diaries at home, even part of the time, that it really enables more people to participate in research, and hopefully with that could potentially increase diversity.
Excellent comments, Amy. I think that you are absolutely right that, with the oncoming adoption of decentralized trials, you would believe that the opportunity for more equitable participation, outreach into previously, potentially unreachable communities, sub cohorts of patients, those who are underrepresented both socioeconomically as well as from a lifestyle standpoint, should be all part of this. And I think that that's part of what's caused this question, because while it's being suggested that that will work, I think that many of us are seeing it's just not quite taking hold. And I would be very interested, if that survey that you did is something that you could share, please put it in the back channel here and we'll post it to the group so they can see that. I thank you. So you mentioned sites, and I think that that's a point of view that needs to be represented in this conversation as well. But I'm wondering if, Brad, you have some comments that you might want to make from a site.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think sites, it's a little bit of a conundrum for sites, because ultimately, and for the foreseeable future, advent of DCT or not, patients are enrolled at sites. That's where the first point of contact is for their entry into a clinical trial. Now, it's great that CROs and sponsors have roles dedicated to diversity and equity and inclusion, but ultimately they're not the ones enrolling patients, not the one it's engaging patients at the site level and educating, spending the time educating and enrolling them into trials and sort of walking through that journey with them. And in my experience, we run, we've got something like 60 open trials right now, and I've never had a sponsor or CRO reach out to me and even have a discussion about diversity or equity in our clinical trial enrollment. These are some of the biggest sponsors that exist. So, and unfortunately for sites, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the statistics. It's like 65% of sites don't have more than 3 months of operating expenses on hand. So they run very lean and are forced to sort of just enroll what's most easily accessible. So I feel like there's a disconnect there. I'm not going to claim to know what the solution is. We'll see if DCT movement helps fill that gap. I think that's probably unclear at this point. But I think it's important to note that I think there's a bit of a gap in that, that push from the CRO and sponsor side, and then from what really happens at a site level for clinical trial enrollment. I'm Brad, and
can I please jump in here? Because I think what Brad said is just spot on. I've worked on a lot of strategies where we're trying to increase diversity in clinical trials. And what we do is we say, okay, we're going to go to these sites in these areas. But the thing that we forget to do is tell the sites that this is why we selected your site. This is what we need from you. And we did this at an investigators meeting where we told all of the sites for a diabetes study that this is what we needed. And we wanted to get from them the feedback of what it would take, what did we have to provide for them in order to increase the diversity at their sites. And it was incredible. They came back with so many good ideas, but one that always sticks out is a guy in Florida who said, I need transportation. And of course, we were all like, oh, no problem. We'll give you, bus tokens and taxis. And he was like, no. My patients are in a place where taxis don't go. Where my patients are, there's not an easy way to get to a bus stop. So what I actually need is a van to pick them up and go around and pick them up and bring them and then take the patients back safely. So, when you think about decentralized clinical trials, you do think, okay, well, this might be a way to help in that situation. This was pre-decentralized clinical trials. But the other thing I want to make sure that people are aware of is that we always talk about that this is a path to increasing diversity. I've spoken to patients, and there's some patients who do not want people coming to their home, not so much that they really care about having their blood drawn or something like that. It's more of the questions that they get from the neighbors and having to respond. And so there's another area of privacy, which you sort of think, oh, we're coming to your home, it's private, but they have to get to the front door and into the front door. And so that's another area where we should start to think about, and ask the patients what they prefer. I'm Almenia.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Almenia. Sorry, Amy, did you want to go ahead?
I did want to jump in on that last bit that Almenia was talking about, especially with regards to, decentralized or, trial activity in the participant's home. And if anyone maybe I'll put this also in a chat as well. If anyone hasn't looked at the CISCRP Perceptions and Insights survey data that came out this past fall, they do that survey every 2 years, and it basically captures participants' input regarding whether or not they've participated in a trial, and if they have, what their experience is like, and if they haven't, why not. And I was really surprised at some of the results regarding technology and who would be interested in technology. And a lot of times we talk about making sure that people have access to the clinic, et cetera. And then there's other folks, who say that different communities may be, not as interested in participating in trials with technology because they might not have as much access. But this survey does break it down by different ethnic backgrounds, racial, lines, man, women, age, et cetera. And there was definitely people from more, diverse backgrounds that were more, apt to use technology, that, it was some surprising information. I don't want to quote the results here because it's not mine to quote. I'll see if I can find it in the meantime, and I'll pass it over to you, Michael, to share with this group. But it might be interesting just to sort of understand the patient experience and appetite there.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Fantastic.
much. Appreciate that. Heather?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I love that you brought up technology. I will add as a short anecdote before I jump in, because I know we have some other people here. It's Heather speaking right now. I work on the technology side, and actually recently in the last 6 months, it's the first time we've actually had sites send us questions about how they can create reports and aggregate data, and specifically with thinking about their communication with the patient, which is from a data perspective outside of sort of the EDC and data capture, but actually coming to their CROs and asking them, we're getting questions from our patients about their study and about their data. We want to know what we can tell them, and we also want to know how we can present that information. So it's a discussion we're having ongoing, and it's actually sort of filtering up directly from the sites, which is interesting because it feels like the sites want to do that for their patients, but there's not really internal processes in a lot of places for the biopharmaceutical companies to handle that process. So it's interesting to hear that that's being asked. Ahmed, you've been up on the stage for a little while. I would love to know what you'd like to share with the group. I'm Heather, and I'm done.
Good morning, good day to everyone. My name is Ahmed Makawi. I used to work at the Mayo Clinic past couple of years and recently joined Google in the user experience space. And so this is a fantastic discussion. And to me, really coming in from another side of things, from user experience, I think my question for the group is around where inclusion and diversity are the issue in some of these trials. Have any of you used or worked with a user experience research team around how to formulate the overall flow for how the study will go, to maybe learn more about the demographics or the study participants that you look to engage for these studies, and maybe ways to better reach. We heard some great things around transportation or accessibility concerns for those with low vision, low hearing, etc. And so, have any of you worked with a user experience research team, and how has it impacted your studies? Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for your question, Ahmed. Does anybody want to jump in and provide some thoughts?
Yeah, so this is Justin, and interestingly enough, I was going to kind of pose the question the other way around and call on Ahmed to speak on that, because I know that is his background. He and I have worked on a few usability projects in the past. But yeah, no, sitting here listening to the conversation, we've touched quite a bit on, how you reach people that aren't in the demographic that we've been reaching previously. We haven't even gotten into the issue of, once you reach those people, how do you even, engage them to the point that they're interested in participating in clinical research. I know we've had, various conversations in this space in the past about the barriers that exist there. But, to Ahmed's point, I'm sitting here thinking and kicking myself about, like I said, our research team has worked with him and other usability experts before, when we, as the end goal of our research. The research has been to develop a product, and once we get a prototype, we engage usability to um, uh, you know um, come to a final design on the product. But thinking about the beginning stage, how, even when there isn't a product to be developed, how do you intelligently design your trial so that you're addressing both the issues of, how do I even get to and make it accessible to, diverse populations, as well as, just engaging them in a way that they're interested in participating. And that's something that we definitely don't do on the front end. I know, at a large organization like I work at, and where Ahmed used to be, I mean, we have, an entire department of health disparities research, that I know does some of that work. But as many of us in this room know, and has been brought up in this talk today, even some, every trial is so different and has different needs and different components, that I think the findings from a lot of, if there is usability research being done, I don't know how applicable the findings are going to be from trial to trial. And it may really be a matter that just needs to be part of the planning for each individual study. How do I make this accessible to people? And I think we're on a study to study basis, we are having those conversations within our studying teams and planning. But to Ahmed's point, what I don't see us doing is engaging usability principles. I don't know that the capability or the bandwidth exists to actually, engage a usability team for every single trial. But maybe that's something that we need to do a better job of, just being part of the education and skill set of clinical research professionals, of knowing usability principles, so that they can do at least a little bit of that on the front end, and actually engage the stakeholders that they're trying to get access to, rather than sitting around and trying to think on their own what would work best to engage those people. This is Justin. I'm done.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Justin. Would anybody else in the group like to jump in? Or I know we have Lisa here. I know Michelle had asked, I think I saw your mic unmute. Would you like to go ahead? I'm Heather.
Yeah, I think we're talking a lot about really where the challenge lies, and it's in the recruitment process. I'm convinced the technologies are there to throw the broader net, and use AI to find those patients that will help with the diversity and equity issue. So it's a matter of how you adopt it, though, and that's where I see the challenge. And I think that's really the topic at hand: is how do you advocate for that? Who is the individual within an organization? And let's talk about the sponsor organizations who makes this a primary principle with the process of clinical trials. To Justin, your point, designing is absolutely an aspect of that. So I would like to ask if there's anyone in the group, even in the audience, who has any experience with some of these emerging roles. I mean, I have seen one. I think it's referred to as a chief health equity officer. The chief equity officer is typically from a top-down type of executive position, and usually on talent management, the whole human resource side of the business. But we're talking about healthcare, and we're talking about equity in clinical trials. So does anyone have something to share with that? I personally don't have that knowledge, and I'm here to find that out. I'm Michelle, and I'm finished speaking.
Hey, Michelle, this is Edie. And I don't have the exact answer from the perspective of the sponsor implementing, a chief equity officer and how successful that role is from inside the industry. What I can tell you I've seen that's been of great interest to me is the folks who are in trial recruitment space. So they're not necessarily the site, they're not necessarily the sponsor, and they're also not the CRO, right? They're their own freestanding recruitment firm. And the ones who are doing it for, the bigger purpose, right, the bigger picture, are starting to use, like you said, the technology to track not just the demographics of who they placed and who made it to the trial, but all the people that screen failed before it even went to the site, and using AI to go through protocols so that when they wrap up the engagement with that particular trial or that particular sponsor, they can give feedback to the site as well as the sponsor, because they actually follow the patient at, of course, the patient's permission and consent. They follow the patient's experience and may even continue to try to help the patients pair with trials if they screen fail out initially. And so because they make it very clear the patient is really who they're most concerned about in all this, even though they're obviously taking their money from a sponsor for a site, they will give those metrics back to the sponsors and sites to tell them, look, if this one criterion had been removed or even slightly modified, you would have gotten 15 more participants at your site. Or here's the feedback about what the burden was on the patient to come to the site, to not come to the site, what they liked, what they didn't. What's interesting is what the sponsors and sites do with that information. The sites seem far more interested and receptive and reactive, right? Like they're making changes based on the data. The sponsors thus far, and these would be big sponsors that we all know the names of, and often have actually implemented some type of a DEI role or a JEDI role, or I've even heard it called a belonging role. They don't seem quite as interested, or maybe it's just taking them longer to process that information. So I'll share that with the group. This is Edie. I'm done speaking.
So I've noticed that Elle Hamilton has joined. I wonder if we could call on Elle, because I think she's got some experience in this area that's really vital for the group to hear. Michelle.
Hi, this is Elle. And yes, thank you. I agree with what Edie was saying in some regards in terms of the outside clinical trial recruitment. But I've also seen from the inside in terms of past clients at large pharma who, to our question here of who are focused in large biopharma on trying to drive clinical trial diversity. And I want to share with you a few of the roles that I've come across and people that I've connected with on LinkedIn or have worked with on various initiatives. For example, there are titles of very specific to diversity and patient engagement, and that includes both on the clinical side as well as commercial. So meaning bringing them into the trial and then the full continuum across it, keeping them engaged and, as you said, having access then to the medicines. There are emerging roles called R&D patient integration managers, and they are often then sitting within R&D very much focused on integrating a broader diversity of patients. There are global health equity and population science executives, epidemiologists who are heavily involved in these efforts at large pharma. I've also seen it, for example, at companies like Genentech. They have science leads for advancing health equity, again, looking at it across the entire continuum. There's also somebody like Novartis. I know they have like a global head of diversity and inclusion in clinical trials. And this is a whole team led by a senior director that is just focused on this area. And then other large pharma are titles like Principal of Health Equity. So I do believe that while the results are taking time to actualize, there's a lot of effort and thought internally to how to best execute this. So yes, I've seen it trickle down from the internal efforts we've talked about to these diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, but really it has now been added to the clinical side and given a lot of attention. This is Ellen. I'm done speaking.
Hey, Elle, this is Edie. Great addition, fabulous information. Quick follow-up question. Do you know, obviously results take time, do you know, or could you speak to, even just anecdotally, from a like metrics, programmatic, organizational focus, how any of these teams are going about attacking it? Or maybe, any small victories they've had, anything that's been shared that you can kind of share in the aggregate of how they're attacking it all?
This is Elle. To answer your question, Edie, I would say a few victories I've seen have been based first on research. So looking at starting from a recruitment side, everything from how are the materials resonating with the targeted audience. And so a lot of hard looks at, okay, is this communicating in the right way? Are the ways that we're doing outreach the right way to touch them, and just driving at, are those the right images that would appeal to these are these the right investigators? The one big issue we haven't touched on is trust, and so a lot of the feedback from the research was indeed, look, I don't trust this investigator. They don't look like me. They're not of my color. They don't understand me. And a lot of cultural and trust issues that have to be tackled, because they're not going to want to be, even if they have access to a clinical trial, they don't trust the system, pharma, or the process. And we've certainly seen this playing out. The companies that have focused on it, they've done a lot of effort then, and the victory would be attracting investigators in communities of color where they want to focus, and then training the investigators to use the right language, use the right materials, and get them engaged, and then to give them the extra attention so they don't drop out of the trials. And that's been quite important as well. So I'd say the metrics are little victories like that, but to this point, they're just small percentage increases, but it is some progress. This is Al. I'm finished.
Elle, this is Michael, and I can't thank you enough for really bringing up the fact that the devil is in the details here. We talk about the broad concepts of health equity, but the reality is that it comes down to these small wins that you've been talking about. So thank you so much for bringing that to the fore here. I would like to call on Melissa. I think, Melissa, you've been blinking there. I'm not sure whether that means that you have something you want to contribute to our one burning question, but
yes, thank you so much, Michael. My name's Melissa Delia Calisans. I'm a clinical health and wellness educator. And one of the greatest barriers that we see, or actually two greater barriers that we see with recruitment for programs and pilot programs, is childcare and travel. So transportation and childcare. And so what I usually try to encourage people to do is to piggyback on other people's programs that are focused on children, early childhood development, because oftentimes in underserved communities, which often include people of diverse natures, you're going to have a wonderful assortment of people of ages, demographics, and you then have usually where there's childcare taken care of, there's usually some great transportation, since they're usually done in recreational facilities or in schools. And so you're getting rid of one barrier, and then you can also see a lot more that goes into taking care of whatever you guys are trying to research, whether it might be from pharma or from mind body. You've got families that are impacted with somebody who's trying to participate. So when you see the transportation issues and the timing, especially in rural communities and even in urban development, what time are these transportation access challenges occurring, and should you be then scheduling these programs at these certain times? So I encourage people to reach out to people who are doing things with early childhood development. I personally don't deal with that demographic or that sector, but I deal with chronic pain, sleep, and mood management. And we see that oftentimes people who are having those challenges with chronic pain, sleep, and stress and mood management have children, have transportation, and professional responsibilities that make it very challenging to stay within any type of program that is being measured. So hopefully that gives some people something to think about. Transportation and childcare, big barriers. My name is Melissa Adelia Calisans, and I am
Melissa, outstanding contribution. Appreciate that a great deal. Real quick, I want to just uh, go out to Amy real quickly here because she's spent so much time in looking at costs of transportation, cost of outreach for this, and it's a lot of what Greenfire ends up doing. Amy, a quick comment, and then maybe we'll go to Lisa after that.
Sure thing. So we've seen some really progressive sponsors and CROs accounting for some of these other expenses. So there's been, I think, a desire, and a recognition and a lot of talk around patient centricity. But then, some people feel like, oh, we'll just reimburse for, parking and then we're done. And what Melissa was alluding to is that especially for women, we may have more of a burden of childcare. If you want to attract women to participate in clinical research, you have to ensure that you're providing things such as elder care and childcare and reimbursing for more than just the bare minimum. And especially maybe they might, register, but then they drop out later on just because they don't quite realize at that time the intense toll that some of those burdens might play on their life. And so we've seen some sponsors, be a little bit more progressive in terms of their definition of what they're going to provide for their patient engagement programs. And it hasn't been across the board, and it has also been a bit, I don't want to say controversial, but it certainly hasn't been aligned across the board with regards to approval from IRBs and ethics committees around the world. But we do need to, make sure that we're thinking about that whole patient and whole participant and what they bring to the table in their life and how we're going to keep them for the long term. So absolutely agree, with some of the things that, Melissa was mentioning. And then also, I do want to pick up on one of the things that Brad mentioned with regards to being asked about diverse enrollment. So where we sit, we are, right square and working with all these different stakeholders at Greenfire. And I do hear a lot of talk from the sponsors and CROs and wanting to be, more conscious of diverse enrollment in studies. But yet I hear, from Brad today and then sitting in on SCRS calls, that it's sometimes just talk, that sites have not necessarily been asked or, suggested, that they should, enroll diverse folks in studies, and I don't know if it's just because, there is, such an urge of wanting to get studies closed and get a drug to market, that anything that could potentially delay, that happening is, I don't want to say discouraged, but, I think that there could certainly be more communication from sponsor to site, and then, giving sites the tools, to communicate to diverse communities where they're located in their immediate area, or providing, sort of decentralized tools that, allows them, to involve people from all different backgrounds. It's different work, I think, than what a lot of times people in healthcare have been, perhaps charged with doing. Some of these more community involvement types of roles, it's not the same as what, someone went to school to be a nurse, or if they went to school to be a doctor, or a healthcare administrator. I feel like we're looking at different skill sets, like people who are technologists and people who are working more as community organizers and helping to sort of bridge the gap and bring, new and needed folks into clinical research. And I'm Amy, and that's my comment.
Amy, great insights again, and I have to tell you that, you're living it in your business world, but you certainly are feeling it as somebody who would be going into a clinical trial. And I think that we all have to recognize that it's taken us decades to move from terminology such as clinical trial subjects to actually talking about patients and people. So it's not a surprise to me that it's taking a lot of effort to try and get to an understanding of how health equity actually gets practiced versus what it's talked about. Lisa, do you have some thoughts that you'd like to share because you've been patient?
Oh, hi, Michael. Yeah, sorry, I have to join late when you schedule these, but no, I do. I have a ton of this is quite a passionate area for me, and I, look at this daily. I just to give a little background about myself, I'm a clinical trial manager with a very large pharmaceutical company, and this is important to us. We have our patient and recruitment team, particularly looks at this specifically, and we're trying to. Diversify our patient populations that we're enrolling. And because I came late, I'm not for sure if this already had been mentioned, but, the FDA released guidance for the industry in regards to enhancing diversity in clinical trials and looking at eligibility, enrollment practices, and trial design, right? And so unfortunately, it came out in November 2020, at the height of the COVID situation. So I think it kind of got overlooked. But I think that guidance document really prompted the industry because, we were still looking at some of the things that were coming out from the FDA to kind of look at how we design trials and how we could, include patients. And a couple of things that come to mind and from this document that I think a lot of you have already mentioned is, engaging our sites and engaging our, patient advocacy groups. A lot of patients, there, are go to those groups first to see what's available in regards to treatment. And then I do think it's important for us in the industry to look at physicians who look like their patients, right? So targeting diversity in regards to the physicians and the PIs that we work with. And that may mean we'll have to go out of our comfort area and get physicians who've not done research before and work with them and train them. So I think that's one area that we could definitely improve. There was somebody mentioned DCTs, and I'll just tell you my experience with that. There is very large, I won't name the company, home health company that works in the industry, and most everyone if you work on the trial side has probably worked with them. And I found it quite difficult to work in areas like Chicago and Washington D.C. We would get a nurse scheduled, and then the nurse would refuse to go because it happened to be in a very high crime rate area. So we couldn't see the patient, and we just missed this visit. And it was during COVID. And so, that didn't really help me. So I was like, what company out there is willing to make these visits regardless of where they are, even if that requires two nurses to go out so that they feel safe. And, I did find a vendor that actually was able to do that and even go to rural areas and make those visits happen. But, it was quite frustrating because, you would get the way that model was set up was to find home health nurses in that area who didn't really understand the trial, and then you were training them on the fly, whereas the other company had dedicated research staff as part of their plan, or I guess their company model was that they were dedicated and they were nurse practitioners or they were RN, so they could do assessments. And so that was one of the things that I had to do was find a smaller company who was looking to kind of burgeon into that market and would be able to guarantee that these visits happened. When we're looking at early engagement of our protocol design, I think, Justin, you touched on this. It's really important for us to reach out to patient advocacy groups and our sites and our KOLs, our key opinion leaders, who can tell us how to design these trials a little bit better earlier on in earlier stages. I 100% agree with that because I think we waste a lot of our time and we could shorten that white space to getting drugs approved if we listened early on. So I'm a full proponent of that. I think some things we should look at in a broader scope, and this is straight from the FDA guidance document, I'm 100% on board with these, is consider re-enrollment of participants who were in early phases of the trial into later phases. And then also looking at open label extensions to broaden, inclusion criteria for patients, because typically, if something looks like it's working, then these patients have to wait quite a while before they can get access to that. So making open label extension trials would be a great way to, kind of basically say what we're, that we're here to help you, right? And that we actually mean it. And if you just bear with me for 1 minute, the other thing that I wanted to say, and I think a lot of you have seen this in our trial designs, hepatitis C and HIV patients have typically been excluded. And I think we'll still see that in some of our protocol designs. But, there are drugs out there that keep these patients basically essentially hep C and HIV free, right? So if you can look at the drug regimen that those patients are on, and you're also looking at a different disease that they may, like hypertension, right? They may still suffer from hypertension and diabetes. And if the drug you're looking at and you do early PK analysis or even analysis of drug-drug interaction to show that the drugs that they're on won't interfere, then those patients could still be enrolled. We need to look at that. One thing I think in trial design too, that if you'll see typically, the GFR rates for patients, African Americans have a higher rate versus other patients, and taking that out and looking at that and saying, do we need to look at our, GFR rates from that perspective so that we don't exclude African American patients? A big thing that I would love to see are mobile clinics or bringing research to the masses, whether that's via worship centers or health clinics. I think that would open up our access to patients in rural areas as well as, increase the diversity in clinical trials. So sorry, that was a lot. I'm passionate about it. When I look at feasibility, I've got a diabetic retinopathy trial, and I want to look at, the Southwest. I want to make sure that we've got a good, Native American population. I know that they suffer from diabetes, and but trying to find PIs in that area has been difficult. But again, thinking outside the box to include PIs who don't have the experience, and we'll work with them. So those are some of the things that I'm doing in a practice setting from a trial development standpoint within my company. And I'll continue to push for that. And I think that, the industry wants us to do that, and our patients need us to do that. So, right, I'm Lisa.
Lisa, outstanding perspective, because especially coming from, the quote unquote industry or sponsor side of things, I think it's important that, the challenges that you're faced with also come into an understanding of how well this can be done. So thank you very much. Julie, I'm going to ask you to reset the room for the last 15, 20 minutes that we're going to have here, and then we'll come back with Tara.
Hi, everyone. This is Julie. Thanks, Michael. Just a few things to note, just resetting the room. Everyone, thanks for joining. It's been a really great conversation. A lot of really great perspectives. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Julie Schmidt, Project Manager at Consuli and host for this clinical trials room. Just a little bit about Consuli's mission. We're a public benefit company working to create a marketplace where we deal individuals like you and me into the data economy and help make medicine better by smart matching patients with clinical trials that are right for them. And we're creating movement. There's no cost to join. Please check us out, sign up. You can find our website, links to our socials, as well as my direct email in my bio. And be sure to follow our club, Consuli Conversations. Just tap the little greenhouse at the top. Check out our other rooms as well. And just a reminder to ping people that you think might be interested in this conversation into the room by using the little plus sign at the bottom there. You can filter through your followers by narrowing your search, which is especially helpful if you have many followers. And please, for anyone that might be, feeling inspired, please raise your digital hand, join the conversation. We will do our best to get to everyone in the last 25 minutes or so that we have left. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to pass the mic back to Michael. This is Julie, and I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Julie. Appreciate that. Just as a reminder, this is the Clinical Trials Clubhouse, and we are discussing our one burning question today, which is what are the emerging roles within biopharma companies to ensure, promote, and take responsibility for true health equity for all patients enrolling in clinical trials? Is this happening? And if so, is it being done effectively? I think we've had some great conversations about this, and I'd like to go out now to one of my longtime friends and colleagues, Tara Goodman. Tara?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tara Goodman, and I really appreciate you, Michael, including me on this really interesting platform. Everyone, this is my very first time, so hopefully I follow protocol correctly, just as a disclaimer. Um, I am in the space similar to Julie. I work in technology and data, but I've historically been in the CRO world as a service provider for clinical trials the majority of my career. And I find this such an interesting topic because it's something that is so near and dear personally and professionally. Just to address kind of the first point about emerging roles, the majority of our clients are top pharma, so the top 20, 30 pharma, but also what we call small, mid-sized biotech as well. So I get a wide breadth and depth of perspectives from potential and current clients. So I do see a lot of emerging roles in terms of trying to bring in more equity, inclusion, and diversity. Some of those titles, they vary from company to company, but to a couple of points people made earlier, is it just talk or is it reality? Are companies willing to be put that commitment and time in to really have more inclusivity as well as diversity in trials? And I think one thing companies like where I'm currently working is really trying to partner with the biotech space using data to drive decisions. So we are actually releasing a new component to part of our current software platform that will include race and ethnicity. So we have about 325 million de-identified people in our database, and about, I'd say at this point it's about 110 now million are our race and ethnicity. And it's almost our responsibility in the technology world to be able to, in a very obviously non-PHI way, HIPAA compliance, but link that information not just on the patient level, but we also include it on the provider level. So the providers, it's rolled up to provider because then you don't have the confidentiality issues as much, but then it becomes a real tool for biopharma to have feasibility, pick sites, pick investigators, and they have the answers in front of them, and there's no more excuses. So again, in summary, I think it's part of our job on the technology side to empower the biotech clients so that they're not viewing it as a time loss in including diversity in trials. It's more of yet another component. And also pressure testing protocols. It's thinking about trials differently. I mean, our partners further down the life cycle in terms of like commercial and even med affairs, they've been using data to help drive decisions for a long time. But I think our clinical development world is finally being more open and responsive to using not just real world analytics and real world data, but also some of this historically aggregated data to really understand the landscape and do a much better job at feasibility, site selection, investigator selection. So I really appreciate you allowing me to share. Hopefully I said something that's valuable. And this is Tara, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Tara. Appreciate that. I'm glad you're joining. First time you did amazingly well, as I would expect. So thanks again, and hope you'll join us every month, first Thursday. Cynthia, I can't wait to hear from you because I know you are blending in both marketing and looking at health equity, messaging, etc. So Cynthia, if you'd like to join and have any comments, we'd love.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is Cynthia. I'm a long hauler, so I have I've been thrust into this world of research through necessity, and I'm liking the change that I'm seeing in these spaces in talking about the solutions of diversity in research. And I agreed with so much what Lisa was saying. She was saying so many things that was right. Um, Research has historically just in the structure in clinical trials, leaves out a segment of our population because of specific hurdles. And you have to start with the intention and really build into reaching out to minority community leaders to even see if your ideas about feasibility and location are actually doable. And what I've seen is that we are absolutely happy to have people reach out to us. Like, definitely reach out. And I've had a lot of that happen during long COVID. People reach out to me. Like, I have a bunch of journalists reach out to me looking for people of color to have stories about. I'm seeing a really good change, and I've even in the research and trials, I'm definitely seeing more effort being put forth, and I'm thankful that I'm seeing this change. I'm hopeful that, as you all were saying, when push comes to shove and they have to wait a little bit longer to get that specific amount of diversity in the trial stage, that decision will be made to prioritize. But definitely, like, there's so many of us Black leaders that are in the research space or in the physician space that have a network. And if you just reached out, you would have zero problem finding everything that you need to complete it in a diverse way. So it really comes with the structure and if you start from the beginning and structure it so that you make those connections, then you'll have everything that you need going forward. Because our community, and I say our as in the Black community, are so wary of the medical community, understandably, at least in the United States, understandably from the past history. And we really look to our Black leaders to tell us that a space is safe for us to enter. And we have enough of those Black medical professionals to tap into to get this work done. If you just have to go and look. Like, we're like, we're so excited. Everyone that I talk to, they're really excited that we're now being reached out to, because we have the network. We've been here all along. We've just been waiting for the opportunity for people to reach out to us. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I appreciate that we're really going to look into whether or not it's actually going to come to fruition. Because it's one thing to reach out, it's one thing to attempt to do it, but it's another thing to, when things get tough and then you're looking at, you're potentially going to take a financial hit or financial delay or any sort of delay in releasing this information, if that means to really stick to what you're saying you want to say. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on this space myself, and I know a lot of us in the Black professional community are keeping an eye on this space as well. And
Cynthia, thank you so much. Certainly I'm sure I reflect the best wishes of everybody on this panel here for continued improvement in your health. I have a strong belief that Michelle Youngers will be in touch with you to talk to you a bit more about this, because I love some of the things that you're bringing forward. What I'd like to do at this point is we're at 11:45. We typically reserve the last 5 minutes of the clubhouse to bat around some ideas about what will be a great one burning question for next month. But what I'd like to do is incorporate that in a go around the horn here, let everybody have an opportunity to share final thoughts on this topic of health equity. And if you have an idea for either an extension of this or a completely different topic, I hope you'll vocalize it. We're capturing all of this, and we'll be, obviously trying to put together an equally interesting and controversial topic for next month. So can I start with Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. This is Brad. Thank you. So, I think one of the points to kind of I want to tie into all this is that clinical trial participation is not a transaction, right? It's a relationship, really. And I think that's why, it's going to take time to see changes in diversity and equity, and also to sort of echo Cynthia and even Elle and some others. I think the answer is in continued and growing community partnerships. Really, the sort of entry to clinical trials is hard if you're an investigator. It's not easy. It's not easy to know how to participate in trials or how to carry out trials. So, and I don't want to be self-promotional. There's companies like mine and a lot of others around the country that are starting to offer these services at a free of charge, so that trials can be done in underserved areas. So I truly think that that's sort of the future going forward, that I think, at least in some small way, could help open the door by reaching out to these communities and being there, and not just for a transactional reason to get you in a trial, but to truly invest and set up shop and start to work within these communities. So that's really all I kind of want to tag on to the end there. And I'm Brad, and that's it.
Brad, thanks. Appreciate you not only being here today, but again, giving good, thoughtful comments in there. Melissa.
Hi there. Thanks again, Michael. This has been wonderful to listen to and to know that there's people that are really doing their best to find out how to reach out to underserved and diverse communities. What I think is really important, once again, is understanding that reimbursement is not often an incentive, because sometimes people have to choose between putting their gas in their car just to get there, that they're not going to be able to pay for parking to begin with. So reimbursement is not an incentive for most of the people that are coming from underprivileged communities or rural communities. So again, really understanding the infrastructure of the areas where you're going to be holding these. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted right now. I'm not. I'm at home. We have to really be cognizant of those challenges for people. So again, transportation, childcare, access to financial, again, lunchtime, maybe even something of a challenge, finding their food at a certain time, because after they're done showing up, well, by the time they get home, they can't even stop and get something to eat. So being aware of those challenges and those things, and again, community support, community outreach, and having people who are addressing and approaching people about this need to look like the people in the communities that they want to serve. So not just the physicians, not just the providers that are helping with these trials, but the people who are doing the outreach also need to be trusted people in the community, understand the language they speak literally and figuratively, and to create that trust, but it needs to be sincere. So reach out to your health educators, reach out to your social workers, reach out to people truly doing the work in the schools and in their food support network. So I'm Melissa, and I'm done.
Melissa, ooh, I love the practicality of what you're talking about, and certainly as reflected in some of the work that people on this panel are doing. We're recognizing that the patients are functionally looking for cures or for better patient outcomes and better health care parameters, but at the same time, they are volunteering and their data is, being utilized. So it's our strong belief that patients should be compensated for that data. That data is reportedly worth up to $20,000 a year from a standpoint of personal and healthcare data. So if you try to monetize this here, this shouldn't be about reimbursement. It really should be about what is the value of the information that you are sharing. So thank you so much. Amy, you've been great. I'd love to have you. Any final comments or suggestions for the next?
Oh, tough question. There's so many good things that were, talked about today, and I really, after hearing Brad talk and a couple other folks on today's call, I feel like there's almost like particularly like Cynthia, like I feel like there's a missing link, between the sites. Like I'm really cognizant that sites are busy. That's why the solutions we provide like help remove that some burden of like doing patient reimbursement, but that just scratches the surface. Like there's so much that sites have on their plate, and yet I know that sites want to be doing more diverse outreach. So it feels like there's like a role, like a community engagement role that needs to be further established, similar to, what Brad is working on that helped us and, other organizations are working on, but it is very disparate. It's very site by site, therapeutic area by therapeutic area, but it seems like community outreach needs to be a bigger presence within clinical research. So I think that would be an interesting topic, to talk about like how folks are successfully doing that. Another area, and this is really reimbursement specific, but we're really interested right now that we've heard a lot of folks, similar to what Melissa was talking about, is that reimbursement is not, is not a luxury. We do hear sometimes from sponsors, well, what are patients and participants in research spending their reimbursements on, and we can't share that type of data at scale. It's private, but this is not people taking the money to go on vacations. This is really enabling folks to participate in research. And one of the concerns we do have is around the taxation on stipends, and it does dissuade people from participating in research. It's a big focus for us in 2022 is just ensuring that the regulations that maybe have been put in place, whether it's tax, or data privacy, that those things are not counterintuitive to the research participation process. So what are we doing? Can we peel away whatever the barriers and obstacles are, that may be infrastructure based that we can remove to help folks participate in research? So topics around that be super interesting for us. And I'm Amy, and I'm completed.
Amy, thanks. I was furiously typing some great ideas. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure thing.
Lisa, any final comments?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks and Julie for having me. Always love sharing the stage with you all and the wonderful information that I glean from others. And Amy, I think that topic is great. And one thing I'd like to learn more too is this, access to care and knowing, where these patients are and what their barriers are, I think is really key and important. So thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Again, really appreciate the investment of time and talent into our meeting here. Lastly, I'm going to come up here to Michelle. I think that this might have been a really good trove of information for you.
Yes, that's what I don't really have much to add, but I did want to say thank you, everyone, for your contributions. It's been very enlightening for me to understand more. And of course, I do love the topic of data dignity, and individuals being dealt into the data economy. For those who are not aware, Consuli does also have a data dignity clubhouse. I believe it's next Wednesday at 9 a.m. if anyone's interested in joining that. Julie probably has more detail on that or can include you. So I'm Michelle, and I'm finished speaking.
All right. Well, listen, I'm going to pull the curtains on this with a sincere thank you to each of the people that have contributed to the panel discussion, those who have stayed and those who needed to drop off. It's great every time we get together, and thank you so much for those of you in the audience, those of you connected to us. Awesome to have that connection. And to those of you who are not connected to us, please reach out to us. And I'm going to have Julie take us out, and we look forward to seeing all of you on the next Clinical Trials Clubhouse as a part of the Consuli conversations on the new in the new year. So, Julie.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. Julie here. As always, thank you so much for a really great conversation. I personally think this might be one of my favorite Clinical Trials Clubhouse rooms. In closing, again, I'm Julie, Project Manager at Consuli, host for Consuli Conversations. And as we wrap, just be sure to follow me, all of our moderators, panelists, and co-hosts here today. Check out everyone's profiles. Check out the details of our other upcoming rooms. As Michelle mentioned, we have our Data Dignity Clubhouse coming up next week. Always a really, really fascinating conversation. That is on Wednesday, 9 to 10:30 Pacific time. Definitely drop in and check that out. You can add rooms to your calendar now. That's a nifty feature. And for any direct questions, comments, feedback, if you'd like to join our panel in the future here or in another room, if you have someone to recommend, please send me a message. Always love hearing from you guys. And again, for those that joined during our event or after the opening announcements and don't yet know Consuli, broadly, Consuli is a public benefit company with the mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy, with experts suggesting our individual data is worth $20,000 per year. So we do this by operating a marketplace for members where we become their agent and assemble their data, including health records, labs, prescriptions, wearables, etc. And importantly, members receive smart matched individualized offers from us for opportunities, including to participate in clinical trials and data trials. So if members are interested in being part of the data dignity movement, you can sign up to be matched to a study or a data trial at consuli.net. That's consuli.net. You can click the link pinged at the top to of the room. There's no cost to join our movement. You can learn more about us through our socials as well, which are in my bio. And I very much look forward to the next Clubhouse discussion. Our next clinical trials room will be next month in January. So we all hope to see you then. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. This is
Yes,
Julie and
wishing everybody safe and happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, happy and Merry Christmas to all. Julie, thanks so much for a great room today. And again, we'll look forward to seeing all of you next month.